again, it's a real pleasure to greet you on stage for the very beginning of the afternoon at this super crucial, important networking event, empowering equity again. I guess we're all wondering what your journey has been like because you have been true pioneers when it comes to funding the ecosystem and especially with the companies you're investing in. Maybe let's start with you, Anne, if you may, with a quick question. Actually, I'm so sorry about this. I'm just wondering, which was the main barrier you encountered when setting up your fund?
So my name is Anne. I'm a partner at Sofinnova Partners, and we are very happy to have EIF as one of our LPs for our third fund, MD Start 3. And Elodie here championed the due diligence process 4 years ago, and we've had a great relationship since then. Sofinnova Partners has had a very long-standing relationship with EIF, as you heard this morning. But when I raised MD Start 3, it was a bit of an interesting dynamics. I was at the time the only partner in the fund. We were in the process or had committed to adding a second partner post first closing, but I was the only partner at the time. I had partners in the previous funds, and for different reasons, including age, they had decided not to commit as full-time partners for the new fund. And so during the fundraising, I became pregnant with my fourth child, which was not necessarily the best timing. It's never the best timing, but it's always the best timing.
Well, it's the timing.
Exactly. And so I remember having to go to Antoine Papiernik, the managing partner at Sofinnova, to tell him, hey, I'm pregnant and we're fundraising and I'm the only woman in the fund. So, what is your recommendation? And so he was like, well, you're going to pick your phone and call every single one of your potential LPs and you're going to tell them. And, if they hang up or say they're going to stop working, well, then you don't want to work with them. It's pretty easy. And so I did that. I mean, it was kind of a stressful moment. And it, of course, went very well. I mean, when you have, LPs you can trust and people who respect you, it's, 3 months are not going to make a big difference. I was very committed to getting to closing. Fundraising was definitely the greatest barrier, right? It's a long road. There are a lot of bumps and unexpected things happening during the fundraising journey, and it's a lot of learnings, I guess.
Absolutely, what a journey! I mean, when you two are just listening to what Anne has went through, did you experience the very same thing, or am I just the only one saying, "Oh my God, this can actually happen," in 2022, or maybe prior to 2022, just being asked by a male manager if being pregnant will be a problem?
Well, I was the one asking my male manager if it would be a problem. I had 2 people on my team, 2 women. One of them was on maternity leave when I was raising the fund. So it is. I mean, when you're a small team and you have to make sure there's enough resources at work, it is a question.
Is it still a question?
Well, I think it's still a challenge for women when a woman decide to put on a family and have a child in the workplace. Fortunately, I started working in this space when I had already a child. So I had this problem previously, but I do agree with Anne that was absolutely a challenge.
I've also started working in private equity post having a child. However, I can say I'm partnered with one of my partners is my husband, and I'm asked very often, but he's never asked this question. I'm asked, what do you do with your kid when you go to fundraising? But he's never asked this question. So I tend to believe that it is still one of the things that happen nowadays.
Anne.
Yeah, and in a very, I think, also natural and positive way, if you will. I mean, I have a lot of people who tell me, "Oh, it's amazing. How do you do it with 4 kids?" But you never tell this to a male partner who has 4 kids, right? It's very nice to be saying that, but it is super gender specific.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. But still, I mean, so you are 3 super successful investors. Each of you is working in very different sectors, VC, private debt market, or private equity. Either one sector more challenging than another for women-founded startups and scale-ups, or not? I mean, it doesn't make any difference.
I think, across the board, female representation is not where it should be, whether it's at the portfolio level or at the fund manager level. I don't think there's a huge difference. Maybe, deep tech is a bit, even lower than in other fields. But I think the improvements have to be made pretty much everywhere.
And you do invest in a lot of deep techs and medtechs, by the way.
Yeah, we invest in medtech specifically, which is largely dominated by male founders and male investors.
Well, I think that the challenges are pretty much the same for women entering the spaces, working in investments. So obviously, there are differences in terms of technical competencies required to work in venture capital, private equity, or private debt. But apart from this, when you are a partner, when you are managing a fund, you are facing more or less the same challenges, which has to do with the fact that we are still working in a male-dominated space. So even if some advances have been made, I think since when I started working in this space, which dates back to 2013, but still, there are still a long way to go to achieving equality, I think. We'll be talking about this.
Absolutely. Still a long way to go on any sectors you are working on, Simona.
Yeah, so in private equity, according to research, 38% of juniors are female, but once you go to the senior level, it's on average 10%. I think France leads the way with Ireland and Finland. But it's still a lot of struggle. I think 10% are women at the level of senior positions, which I think is very low. What I wanted also to say is that it doesn't mean necessarily if you correct the balance, gender balance at the level of investment firms, you'll achieve at portfolio companies the same level of equilibrium. But it's a starting point, and I think there is progression done. In private equity in Romania, for instance, there are a few women. However, in VC, in senior positions, there is no woman, so there is still a long way to go. But it's changing.
And when do you think those barriers or those ceiling will be definitely broken? When do you think we will be able to achieve more women put in power on this fund in these funds by what? 5 years from now? 10 years from now?
Sorry.
In what, 10 years from now, 5 years from now?
I wouldn't dare to guess. I think it's a journey, but I think until we give up our biases, and one of the reasons why there is so little funding for female founders is because of a different way of treating the female-led startups. For instance, there is research that shows only preventive questions are asked for female, or in vast majority, while for men it's a promotional question, and it puts females in a very defensive position. So if you don't respond in a promotional way and reframe the question, you actually minimize your chances to get the funding. So I think until we cut these biases and stereotyping for women, and we focus on the advantages of having women at the table, which is a lot actually. I can tell you from experience, we are 2 women in our fund. It's a 4-partner fund. And even if it's maybe annoying for our male counterparts, we bring more risk management and more downside protection, and they are always more risk-taking than us. And I think it's a balanced view through the presence of female representation in our fund. Thanks. Sorry, I was a little bit long.
No worries. Absolutely not. I mean, the stage is yours. But coming back to this bias, I was just wondering, as investors yourselves, do you tend to rebalance, actually, the question while founders are pitching to you their projects and businesses, and do you tend to be a little more tough on male founders than the other partners would be? Do you tend to rebalance and refocus a little bit the pitching process?
When I receive a pitch presentation, the first thing I look at is the team slide, and if there's no women, I close the pitch. And if there's no women on the board, I close the pitch as well. I mean, I know it's very strict and brutal in a way, but and I don't think my male counterparts do the same thing.
Do you also have some tips?
I invest in debt, so much more conservative strategy than that of Anne and Simona, obviously. But we do still focus very much on governance of the companies we decide to invest in. So I'm pretty much interested in how the board of directors are composed. I want to know whether there is enough women's representation in the companies I decide to invest in. Not only on boards, in the boards of directors, but also in senior positions, which is, I think, essential to understand whether we are about to close. We are very far from being close to closing the gap, but this is an initial path, I think.
Simona?
For me, one of the values that I value most is fairness. So I tend to judge based on meritocracy. So I don't ask male counterparts tougher questions than women. But I think I'm also in a good position because we do growth capital. We don't do so early stage. So the track record is proven by results and tangible results. So it's easier to form a view, I think.
And so, do you have any track records on the number of, again, female-funded businesses that you've been able to invest in? Do you keep a track record on those, or it's definitely not a question anyway?
We document, of course, what proportion of our companies have female CEOs and how they perform. I wouldn't say we have large enough numbers to have statistics, but there is literature out there showing, good, if not better performance from women-led companies in our space.
Well, I need to go back to my track record. Mm-hmm. I started investing like 10 years ago, roughly 10 years ago, and back in 2013. Since then, we've been investing in like 65 companies in Italy, only Italy. Well, those companies are excellencies. They belong more or less to all the sectors. They are export-oriented. They are very much on the forefront of innovation. They contribute very, very well to the real economy in Italy. But at the same time, I must admit that only 4 or 5 positions in my portfolio are women-led companies. They have a women CEO. So I think it's very hard to find companies with this condition, with these characteristics. So especially when it comes to deciding whether to set up a fund, fundraising, and start a fund with a specific focus on companies which are women-led, I think you need to come to terms to deployment. So as far as I'm concerned, because I'm pretty much focused on conservative strategies, I invest in debt, so this is quite difficult. I think that in this sense, what was very, very important is the position of LPs, investors in general, not only EEF, but all the LPs in general. When you are due diligence, when an asset manager is under due diligence, LPs are asking questions about the organization. They want to understand how many women are in the workforce. They want to understand especially how the investment teams are composed, whether there are women there, and specifically their seniority. So this is a step forward to gender equality, I think. And in this sense, you are very much focused on this. Even our GPs, we are very much focused on having women in investment teams because this is required by LPs themselves.
Absolutely. And
yeah, I think I wanted to add something, which is that unfortunately, if you look at our deal flow, the percentage of companies led by women is extremely low, right? So, as much, gender bias you can have towards women, there's just a reality that there's not a lot of companies that are women-led. And as you said, you have to be fair and just pick the best ones. I think the problem is going to, it's not necessarily going to come, from us or exclusively from us. Certainly not. There needs to be a lot more, entrepreneurship in women, and that needs to be developed, I think, from the ground up. So hopefully we can, show a direction, but I think there's a lot more to make it happen.
what would be actually your tips for, developing this entrepreneurial spirit and mindset within young women and just, raise entrepreneurs?
I personally think one of the reasons why the funnel is distorted and there are not so many female founders or enough female founders at the level of startups is twofold. One is the lack of support from governments or from partners for post-maternity. And because of household constraints, some of the women don't progress their careers and they don't have funding for advancing their careers. And the second thing, I think women by inheritance are a little bit risk adverse, so they don't want to give up a well-paid job and go start up their own business, are more cautious maybe. So it's just, I think, through role models and success stories, promoting and networking opportunities, you can alleviate access to startup ecosystem for women is necessary to create this ecosystem effect. Yeah.
Barbara, any tips on the female founder side? I mean, how can we just, raise more entrepreneurs and try to, bring this idea of one united ecosystem that can actually, be more open on the fact that we want to be more inclusive when it comes to women founders, again, and entrepreneurs?
I think that here you have to do with the challenges that women are facing. So I think that the problem here is that women are coming in larger size out of MBA programs, business schools, and get onboarded at the junior levels in companies. And after the first difficult years of career, and by the time they get in their mid-30s, they need to face the challenge of handling a family and a demanding job. So most of them quit, some others take a lesser path or lesser job. So what we need to do here is find a way to create the conditions for women to stick around. So the conditions to retain women professionals in the workforce. And as Simona said, I'm thinking about, for instance, flexible working arrangements which are necessary for women to face this challenge, like parental leave policies or facilities for working mother inside the companies. But there are also other obstacles we need to overcome, for instance, equal pay for equal job. So this is a long-standing discussion, I think. This should be, this should be a straightforward statement, but we know that women around the world are still facing wage gap. But this is true even at the highest positions, at the highest position. Also, challenges to have access to the most interesting jobs. So leadership path, leadership opportunities are not equal. That depends on the job you can accede to. For instance, it's much more difficult. There's a challenge to accede to investment teams. Women are offered other kinds of jobs inside the organizations, and those jobs are those who gives you more visibility, more opportunities to improve your career and find the highest level of leaderships. But obviously things have improved since I started working. I remembered when I started working like 25 years ago, there were very, very few women in investment teams as well. No women in executive positions. Those few women that were hired 10, 20 years back now are maybe in senior positions, but we are very few, so there are no role models at the moment. But this point is being addressed, I think, in the sense that those girls that have been hired recently in 5, 10 years will become themselves role models. So this is maybe something that can be addressed. And also we have to face against gender stereotypes that can, affect women's capability of leadership. For instance, the usual stereotype that men take charge and women take care puts women leaders in various dilemmas. For instance, a woman is considered to be too hard, too soft, but never just right in a position of leadership. Or also, a woman is considered to be competent or liked, but never both. Men have the default style of leadership, so women in leadership positions need to work twice as hard as their male counterpart to demonstrate every day they too can lead. So those, I think, are more or less the points we need to work on it.
Absolutely. Speaking of bias, this is just, the task is enormous on how to, put a curb on those biases. But what you girls are definitely saying here, it's just not a question of solving the equation inside the ecosystem. It's more of a society challenge overall, right?
Mindset.
So the mindset of the entire society overall has to change. Do you see, though, any slight differences in between state members? You are coming from very different state members indeed, Romania, France, Italy, and you guys are investing pan-European companies or all across Europe, right? But do you still see some slight differences in between state members to this regard?
We don't see a lot of differences. We invest globally. I think we see not a lot of women in our deal flow across the board. And there might be some industry-specific perspectives. I'll give you an example. I'm investing in the healthcare industry. It's an industry where, there was a role model a few years ago called Elizabeth Holmes, who raised a lot of money. She was a blonde woman, raised a lot of money in the Silicon Valley with people who were not experts at what she was doing. And then, this whole thing fell apart, and she's now convicted for her crimes. You can't imagine the impact of that story on our industry. As a blonde woman raising money in healthcare, you can't imagine how much I had to think about how promotional I should be in my pitches. It's like hours of thinking about, okay, did I sell too much dream here, or was I a bit too conservative, etc. I think unfortunately these stories, the bad role models in a way, they shape the industry, and I have a lot of people around me who are obsessed by this story, and it's the field is going to take a few years to recover from it. So I can't stress the importance of role models, because they do serve as a guiding star for a lot of people, young women in our industries.
Absolutely. If I'm actually telling you that you are role models yourselves, would you embrace the challenge and the part of it, or do you still have to think that maybe I can be a role model too, but you are true role models for all those women in this audience and joining us live with the Turing platform. This is like literally you guys made it, and we can, we're just, trying to learn more about your journey and the way you had to, warm your step into this investment ecosystem. So yeah, would you embrace the part, being a role model?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm honored, right, by what you're saying, but it's a chain, right? I mean, there are people who have done it before us, and then we kind of champion a few steps, and then I have younger people on my team who are kind of embracing that as well. So I think we're just trying to grow the funnel, as Simona said. At my level, I'm still, I think, the only woman in all the boards I sit on. But there's a woman on these boards, right? Which probably was not the case a few years ago. So it's just continuous improvement.
Simona, your role model.
I think it's too much to say I'm a role model, but a champion. I'm trying to make a change in my country, in my segment, and I think linking to what Anne was saying earlier on. I think also the bad examples for women are most publicized and more publicized than bad examples for men, and the impact is even bigger. So the outliers are really put on the map, and I think that's another problem, because there are role models for male, role models for women, but we not so much promote the right role models for women, but we promote the negative ones a lot. So I think that's one of the issues. And regarding about my personal story, and because I know there are many people in the audience that are trying to raise the first fund, I didn't dream of being here for years ago when I raised the first fund, and I made it. So it's really proof that it's possible. And I think how I did it is, or how my team did it actually, is to have a coherent story and to have a complementary team. And we started with a team without knowing the investment process that Patrick was telling about. We didn't know their process, but we started with the team, and we focused on the strengths and turned even the weaknesses into a strength.
And Barbara, what would be your role model advices for the women who are just, attending this event and are trying to raise their first fund, or just, becoming a fund manager?
Well, I think that every company comes with its own culture, its own inclusion and diversity embedded in its own foundations. So if you are offered a job and you like the content of that job and you're interested in that and you like the responsibilities that come with it, just give it a try, but not just once, as many times as necessary to find the right place, the right environment, the right team to strive in, to further in your career. And also, if you decide to be a fund manager, for instance, in private debt, you don't need to be part of the asset management firm, the asset management industry as a start. You can be also part of another industry, as I did when I started working in this space. You might be, for instance, taking part in advisory. You must have a certain competencies to become a fund manager, which has to do with origination and capabilities of due diligence. So the capabilities of evaluation, of a thorough evaluation of companies, because those are the two key elements of success when it comes to building a credit strategy.
Thank you so much. As always, I definitely need your help to ask some questions to our guests. You can do it by raising your hand here in the audience, or, oh my God, I see a lot of hands raising, or you can definitely post a question on the Q&A chat box on the website's events. But we still have two questions. The mics are literally running to you as we speak. And we had two over there. Thank you so much.
Hello everyone. My name is Jontja Braakman from Impact Shakers, and I wanted to say I don't believe it's still a pipeline problem. I've been building the startup ecosystem for about a decade now, and we have so many talented, diverse founders in our pipeline. I don't think this is still the case. And if anybody wants to join our co-investment ecosystem, call us. We will send all the female founders in your direction, because this is not the case. We were getting a bit upset because we know so many of them, and it's a capital problem. And I think you invest later stage, but yeah, that was what I wanted to say. Not a question.
No, but it's definitely a great reaction to share with us, of course. So where can we actually find those amazing entrepreneurs and women?
All over Europe. So we have access to almost every impact incubator, accelerator, investment readiness program in Europe, from Romania to the Nordics to Portugal. And it's grassroots. So it starts at the lowest level, but we also have access to the impact investors. So we do impact and diversity, so it's even a smaller niche, and it's not a pipeline problem.
Thank you so much. This definitely raises a great question indeed. Access to information and access to these incredible founders who are making a difference every single day. How can we find better solution to just identify those women who are making a change? Are your investment funds actually looking at a lower level to, again, just identify those founders?
Yeah, we source, we invest in healthcare in very early stage, right? We create companies. So we source within hospitals and universities, basically. There are, of course, a number of women founders and inventors. I think the truth is that in our industry, it's probably a little less true than in the tech industry. Our founders tend to be, a little more senior clinicians who have had, decades of experience and can face the limitations of their routine clinical practices. So it's probably a bit skewed due to the industry specificities.
So how can we curate better, again, those profiles?
In my opinion, because we invest at a later stage, I think we receive a funnel that is already, most of the startups, if they don't receive funding, they die. So probably that's why at the higher level, you don't receive so many women-led startups, SMEs. So I think that's why the disconnection between what the lady was saying and what we are claiming. But how we can improve, I would remain to support at an earlier stage the female founders, because otherwise the funnel will get smaller and smaller. Yeah.
I'm investing in consolidated businesses, so those are businesses with a history. So it's very hard to find women's-led companies which dates back to decades ago when they started. Because I'm specialized in private debt, senior debt, so companies needs to be consolidated, show financial cash flows, being able to repay a debt with its own repayment scheme. I don't think I have a problem of sourcing actually in Italy, because we definitely are able to understand where companies are around Italy. I'm very much specialized in the Italian market. But the problem is that because those are consolidated companies.
So it's a very different type of companies.
Very different kind of
absolutely.
strategy.
We had another question, I think, raising two other questions. We got a mic. Wonderful.
Hello. Thank you very much for your point of view. I'm very interested in the role model conversation. So what I wanted to ask you is, do you have any female role models you aspire to follow?
Okay, I'm happy to start. So I'm actually very fortunate because Sofinnova Partners has been a very much gender balanced, team. for I would say probably over a decade, if not more. So when I joined a few years ago, there were already 50% representation in female partners and females that are probably 10 or 15 years older than myself, who can serve as role models. I will say though that that's not the case of many management companies, and there are not a lot of role models beyond the company, to my mind.
Barbara, any role models for yourself?
Well, when I started working, and as I said before, there must have been very, very few girls entering the space of investments. At that time, there were absolutely no role models because there were no positions, no senior positions covered by women at the time. At the moment, I must confess, there are few role models in my space. Fortunately, I've seen some improvements in the sense that at least at the junior levels, there has been recruitments among girls in investment teams. So I expect that those role models will come up in the future. Those girls that actually are hired now, in 5-10 years, will become role models themselves. But as far as I'm concerned, unfortunately, not that much.
I will disappoint you and I'll not give you a name, but I can give you, for me, any woman that managed to get into fields that are men dominated, like going to space or going into medical school, being the first doctor in engineering school, are role models, because I know how hard it is to crack it and to go to that level.
And I think we had another question here in the audience. 2 other questions.
Hello, I have a question for Simona. You just told us that you were able to turn weaknesses into strength. I'm curious about that. Can you tell us more?
Well, to give you the context, so not only that we are applying for the first time fund, we had a 50-50 balanced team. We were in a geography where, let's say, LP experiences and returns were mixed. And plus, we had an investment committee, a husband and wife story that we needed to mitigate through governance. So I think the odds were quite against us. So how we played our complementarity of the team was to take the weakness into, and we took it very seriously. So we played everybody's initial experience that they were bringing at the table. We tried to look through the lenses of the founders and what they were in need of. And we realized that actually we were fitting quite a lot of hands-on operational experience, because at the level of SME we are investing. It's very necessary to have a hands-on approach. It's not only structuring and financing and come to boards once per month or once a quarter, because it's not enough to help these SMEs grow. So we turned our operational experience outside the investment experience into strengths, and showed that this can actually help the founders advance their companies. So that's in a nutshell.
Turning risks into opportunities. We had one last question, of course. Oh, 2 last questions.
If I can, sorry. Hello, everybody. I am Malvina. Thank you for this insightful conversation. Actually, someone said before, women are intrinsically more risk-averse than men. And I have a strong belief about this, but I want to know what to think about it. Do you think it's more about nature or nurture? Is it more about the culture we live in, or is it about the biology side, let's say, of women, that women are more risk-averse? Because I think that maybe biologically we also think that women are more risk-averse, but maybe women have been till now more adverse because of lack of role models, because of no women in this sector, because no idea how to manage family, children, and work all together, because of the gender pay gap, because of maternity and not paternity leave and not genitorial leave, So do you think it's really because women are more risk adverse than men, or because we are used to seeing women to be more risk adverse than men?
I totally agree with you, and I think it's chicken and egg story that actually we don't know where it started, but I also think that because women had to deal with the household's finances more than men maybe, and they were paid less than men. So having more constraints turned us into being downside protection. Yeah, so to
things to be worrying about, no?
Sorry?
To have more things to be worrying about.
Indeed,
so.
indeed.
If I may, it's very interesting within Sofinnova Partners. I mentioned there's a number of female partners. For a few of them, a few of them have male, partners, husbands who are at-home dads. It's pretty, it's a pretty frequent thing at Sofinnova Partners, to the point that I have a husband and he works, and I'm like, would I ever dare tell him, or would I be comfortable telling him, he should be staying at home because I'm traveling all the time and making more money than he is, or whatever. But it's, I think you can reverse those paradigms if you're in the right environment. And as you said, it takes time to grow this, but it's not set in stone. It's I think, a historical heritage. Yeah.
Let's hope it's gonna change. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, I do not think that this is about biology. Obviously, it's about experience. It's about how we are used to be. But in fact, actually, there are women that are willing to take risks because things are changing. There are many women willing to do that. So I'm not that sure that women are so risk adverse in the sense of the biological term.
Yeah, let's change the mindset. Just taking the very last question, I'm so sorry about this, on the streaming platform. And I'll ask you, girls, for one tip at the same time. So the question is, what would be the top 3 tips you would give to a young female fund manager in her early 30s? And if you have one tip that will make, if I'm doing the math right, we'll make 3 tips along the line. So do you have one tip for a young female fund manager in her early 30s, Barbara?
At first, you need to work. You need to understand the environment where we are working. Just do the job as you are asked to do that. Do that with the best possible capabilities, and try to deliver the best possible work as it is asked in the very first years of your career.
Simona?
For me, it's build a complementary team, and I think in private equity there are, at least from my experience, there are 4 things that you need to tick the box so that you are successful: ability to originate, ability to fundraise, a growth mindset, and ability to negotiate. And you need to have. No one will have all of them. But if you build a team that brings these 4 qualities that mean many things into play, then you'll be successful.
And Anne, your final tip?
Yeah, I would say, we are in an industry where we expose ourselves quite a bit. You go out and you fundraise and you ask for people's money, and it's stressful. But I would say just dare do it, right? There is absolutely nothing to lose. What can happen? The worst case is that somebody says no, and that's totally fine, right? So that's what I tell me as a mantra when I get into these meetings, because it's never easy. It's you think you say we've made it. No, you have to make it every day. It's never a given. But I always tell myself, hey, you would not be doing your job properly if you didn't just go into this meeting and pitch and ask for money, and it's perfectly fine. It's what you're paid to do. That's basically the expectation. So just get it done.
There you go. So you definitely dared to actually, embrace a journey and becoming role models for the investment landscape and sector and ecosystem as itself. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, journey again, and solutions to crack down the equation on empowering equity. Thank you so much, Barbara, Simona, and Anne.